thanks all for being here at Propelify. I know you all know Aaron very well, but Jason, would you do me a favor and introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to. So my name's Jason Clark. I'm the executive director at TechNYC. And TechNYC is an organization in New York. And the whole idea is to make New York, and I guess I'll say today the Northeast sector,
now we're talking,
the best place in the world to be able to build and grow a tech company. And a lot of what we do is try to make sure that we're partnering, helping like some of our startups be able to incubate, be able to thrive, figure out ways that we can help with some of the advocacy side with the city and state, and also try to figure out ways that we can do some civic engagement work that make it easier for folks to be able to break into the tech industry. So happy to
just
be
hold
here
that
at,
mic a little
Propelify.
closer.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
good.
sure.
You're good. They got you. They adjust, but it'll help.
Right.
So, all y'all know the TechUnited mission is building a better future for all. Jason, you just talked about that as well. Let's talk a little bit about building community. Building community is more than coming out to a single day event once a year. It's something you have to work at almost 24/7. What is the biggest lesson you've learned at TechNYC about building community, and not only building it, I want to also talk about maintaining it.
Yeah, building community is something that we have to do every single day, right? One of the things that I think we noticed and we saw during the pandemic is there is no finite number of terrific ideas out there, right? So how do we figure out ways that individuals who have great ideas can be able to get access to capital? How do we figure out ways that they get the mentoring and the training they need? One of the things that we did during the pandemic is we launched something called the Recovery Challenge. And what we did is we tried to identify folks who had these really innovative ideas to be able to make sure that life is better for different businesses, life is better for different people, like, in the city, when we're talking about helping disabled folks, when we're talking about getting more people of color into these areas. So there's a lot that we can do, and I think a lot of it comes from making sure that we start bringing people together. That's why I think something like Propelify is so important, so that you can be able to have some of those natural, organic conversations that may lead to something in the future. But it also means that we have to be a little bit more intentional about creating programming so that we can make sure folks, regardless of what your circumstance is, that they can be able to learn the skills to be able to be successful in tech, and that we're also ushering them through so that the next great idea doesn't come to waste because they just weren't able to get the training.
Same question.
Aaron, do you want to jump in there?
I'm so used to asking the questions, it's hard for me to listen to what they actually are. I heard
Let's
you.
talk a little bit about the pandemic and the impact that it might have had on how you perceive and build the TechUnited community.
Well, what I think is so interesting about technology-based entrepreneurship, especially software-based entrepreneurship, is that it actually doesn't have borders. Like, we happen to run organizations that talk about the geography of entrepreneurship, but frankly, I don't care about the geography. I care about empowering people to succeed. And one of the things I love about technology is that you can be anywhere and the technology can scale. So that said, with our focus in New Jersey, it's been really fascinating to see, as talent stopped going into New York City to work, the interest and the momentum and energy around, well, hey, what can I do in my backyard around New Jersey because I no longer have to commute to New York City. And so I think there's an interesting opportunity for us to I think we've captured it, I hope we don't lose it, to maintain some of the energy here, to empower people who are building technology-based businesses to be able to do so more here in their backyards.
Yeah, and then maybe if I could just jump in there as well, is that if anything, I feel like the pandemic, it really just accelerated this course that we've been having, especially in the Northeast corridor. There's a study we just did, and we showed that there are over 114,000 new jobs that have been created in the tech sector. It's the biggest increase of any industry in New York. Likewise, when we talk about access to capital and funding, about 10 years ago, there were 621 venture capital firms in New York. Today, there are over 1,791. And then we're seeing some of the larger ones that we saw in the Valley, whether it's Andreessen Horowitz, we're talking about Sequoia, we're talking about Index Ventures. They're all seeing that the Northeast corridor is a critical market that they need to start being able to do more with. So, yes, this has kind of been a little bit of a challenging time, especially over this last couple of years. But I think that the through path that we're on really shows that where we are today is really just the beginning. I'm really excited to see where we are 5-10 years from now.
Jason's highlighting a real problem for New Jersey, which is we do not have 600 or 1,000 venture capitalists. We certainly have lots of wealthy individuals, and there are some fantastic investors, including Tech Council Ventures. I think Jim is still standing there with his legend hat. There are some great real venture capitalists. But the statistics might say we have 100. There's maybe a dozen real organized investors in the state, and that's a huge problem. So we need to do more to attract investors. They exist to organize here so that we can invest in more companies here. We'll do questions at the end.
Yeah, and then actually maybe just, I'm sorry, real quick to what you're saying is, on the flip side, what we're actually also seeing from some of our research is that folks aren't always living in New York. They're coming
here.
out to New Jersey.
But they're organizing in New York.
Right. So, I do feel like as we're talking about that, there's like a natural symbiotic relationship.
And that's why you're here.
As we're working on these things, so that we can make sure folks have access to capital, so that we make sure people can have like the quality of life and be able to raise a family. Like all of these things are part of what's growing now. And it doesn't feel that way because it's been a while and we feel like it's the struggle part of it, but we really are like in the infancy stages. And I really think that at one point, I think the title of this is about why the Northeast Corridor is the best sector for tech. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're on a path where that may actually be true at some point.
Just to be clear, I know you just arrived because you have some, turns out you have a busy thing going on at TechNYC. But I spoke earlier about, obviously many of us here are in this region because of the proximity to New York. We just want to raise the bar, right? We want to see how do we collaborate more? How do we complement the markets more? We don't want to steal your investors, but if we can drive more opportunity here, we'd like to see that happen because I think we're losing too much of it, to your side of the river, frankly.
Yeah.
So what is the collaboration opportunity here? Seriously, like the pandemic has democratized a lot of access. It's provided both of these organizations with a lot more bandwidth to connect with people digitally in a way that was not being done previously. There's mentorship, there's job openings. There's a lot of job openings that don't have the right skills and the right talent force out there to fill them.
Yeah.
Where can we go from here? Entrepreneurship is lonely. We'll talk about that in a second, but we're talking about bigger companies, tech startups. How can we get them to grow collaboratively?
Well, one of the things I hope we'll do is see the TechUnited New Jersey collaborate more directly with TechNYC. We're just getting to know each other, so hopefully that will happen. But more broadly, a lot of New York companies hire the talent in New Jersey. Ways that we can help facilitate happen. We're just as happy for people to have jobs in New York, to be clear. We don't have to keep them here. We just want best of breed. We want excellent opportunities for ambitious innovators. And so I think that in ways we can collaborate on sharing deal flow for investment opportunities, sharing that there might be an investor community in New Jersey that organizes in New York, and maybe we can also get them to organize, not instead of, but in addition in New Jersey. So those are some of the things that I think that we could do, and our organizations uniquely are positioned to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning that, some of the things that come to mind is first, when it comes to like different verticals, right? Like I would love to hear, what are the different subsectors that are thriving in New Jersey, right? How do we figure out a way? Like I know in New York, a lot of these things are fintech. A lot of it is like B2B or e-commerce. We're seeing actually a lot of stuff when it comes to consumer health and women's wellness as well. But if we start to see that there is a particular cohort of investors or even cohort of startups who are doing something really innovative, and then potentially what we can do is figure out a way to kind of marry them with some of the VC firms that are opening up shop literally like right across the the river. Maybe that's a way we can make sure that there is certain access to capital that isn't there as well. But what I also think about too is that we got to do more to create the pipeline part, right? We got to make sure, and I don't know as much here, but I know like in New York, we got to do a lot more when it comes to getting computer science in all our schools. We got to do more to ensure that folks are being reskilled so they can start off at a tech firm, and then after a couple of years be able to roll off and be able to have their own ideas and start their own startup or their entrepreneurship. Like just because, for example, you talk about, I don't know, like an Amazon or a Meta or some of the large, or Google that that's over across the river. They can start there and learn some of those things, and then they can also be able to come back here and then figure out a way to be able to incubate and cultivate more of what the actual tech community looks like in New Jersey.
While we're talking about collaboration, there's always the particular mindset of you're either New York or New Jersey, right? Like you're one or the other. We want to bridge that gap. What is the one thing that you feel really strongly is best done in New York and Aaron best done in New Jersey?
Okay. Well, the first thing is we're at the right place because my wife is from New Jersey. So I've always had and actually I went to Princeton, so been here in New Jersey as well. So I've always got a lot of great things, personally from New education and my wife, right? But I think that there is so much that we can be able to do. So I think that when it comes to well, let's see. I mean, I think there's this terrific new company started by Mark Laura called Wonder, right? That started here in New Jersey and has been doing some pretty amazing things. So how do we figure out ways that they can be able to thrive and be able to build and then be able to connect with other investors here, right? So maybe when it comes to food tech, which is something that's definitely building. Again, the areas that I'm really bullish on are fintech, when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to AI and machine learning. Like, those are really the bread and butters of things that are going on, and there's always a need for. If you go to our website, we have a jobs board that we just created, and it shows that at any given time, there are between 9,000 and 11,000 open jobs here. So how do we figure out ways, maybe through whatever pipeline programs you have, that we could be able to connect some of them to job opportunities there, again, with the idea of being able to create an ecosystem so they can grow and then be able to come to different tech firms that are in New York or that are in New Jersey, or come back to New Jersey and figure out ways that they can start their own businesses. So I think there's a lot that we can be able to do, but the main thing is that this is the area that people are looking to as the new frontier when it comes to tech. And it's the perfect time for us to be able to capitalize on that so that people see, because again, when we're talking about tech, there isn't a border when you go online, right? It's just about whether or not you have a good market. And I think that a lot of times people want to be in the Northeast Corridor because they like the culture that's here. They like the quality of life that you can have in this type of space. So the more that we can lean into those things, I think the more that we can make sure that New Jersey and New York are beginning to thrive, or continuing to thrive.
I think there's a history that has not been collaborative in New Jersey, and we're seeing over the last 5 or 10 years that change pretty dramatically. Princeton's a perfect example. When I started the New Jersey Tech Meetup 11 years ago, Princeton was, many people refer to it as like the walled garden. They were sort of nice from the outside, but stay out there. And that culture has changed when it comes to working with the regional tech and business community, is what I mean by that. That culture has changed dramatically. Princeton now welcomes the tech community inside their doors. They do quite a bit with us. We're working on lots of ways to get their talent connected to folks at like NJCU and Stevens and others. I think you've seen that across the state, that this idea that there were a lot of people who saw like what I did up in Hoboken as competitive to what they were doing in Princeton and otherwise, and that attitude has changed dramatically. So when I talked earlier about this being sort of the platform to showcase these things, that we're just a less mature, I believe, ecosystem compared to someone like what Jason's got going, where he's got incredible stats and data and engaged community to figure out exactly what's going on in their market. Ours, I think, is a few years behind while we're figuring out how do we bring all the right players, which is everyone, how do we get everyone engaged and focused instead of kind of trying to compete in the small pond. And to the point on collaboration, how do we make sure that, now, obviously, as we're getting to know each other, that we cross-pollinate investment opportunities, talent opportunities, mentorship opportunities, empowering diverse entrepreneurs. We have very similarly aligned missions.
Yeah.
Sure. Most of this is an open dialogue, right? It's constantly thinking of one another, reaching out, following up. Everyone always has a million things going on. It's making sure that you prioritize these intentional collaborations to make sure things work. We've got just a couple minutes left, so I'd love for you to each leave me with your advice for entrepreneurs. Aaron, I'm going to start with you.
Well, is that about entrepreneurship community or just entrepreneurs in general?
Let's do entrepreneurs.
In general.
In general.
Well, we did a series in lead up to this. Hopefully some of you saw the best advice in short form format on social media. Hopefully some of you saw that and registered, because that was the idea. But the best advice that I've received when it comes to entrepreneurship is about what someone referred to as the rule of 21. When you ask someone for advice or help or some way to do something for you, especially like at events when we're talking about trying to connect with speakers, any of these individuals, all of these exhibitors, they all have 20 things in their lives that are going on that are more important than whatever it is you're working on. Even though whatever it is you're doing is the most important thing in the world to you, or in the top 3, for them, they've got like something with their kids, something at their job, somebody sick, whatever it is. And so the follow-up and the respect and being respectfully staying on top of those conversations and being value-driven first. What can you do for that other person? How do you communicate it in literally 3 sentences? I get emails that are this long. Like, attention is the name of the game. So I think for me, the best advice is being respectful of value-driven first and understanding where you are in their list of priorities, and then you'll see that people will want to help you. Many of the speakers who are here today, Jeff Hoffman, who I think may have left, the co-founder of Priceline, eventually responded to my cold email, eventually showed up at the New Jersey Tech Meetup, eventually invited me to coffee. I mean, this is like a decade-old relationship. And then, a guy who normally gets paid handsomely to speak flew himself here and spoke for free. So those kinds of, when you're value-driven and you provide value to the other person, they will do, they will work with you and they will respect, I think, the authenticity and the hustle.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is fail forward. Most businesses, the first time, they don't make it. But you learn certain things there. Like for me, one of the things that is that I always think about is that we got to figure out a way to eliminate these limiting beliefs in ourselves, right? The things that tell us that my idea isn't great enough, that I have too many other things that are going on. Like, it's not in the cards for me to be able to do that, right? And I think a lot of times when we talk to some of our entrepreneurs and our tech leaders, we don't always realize that when they made it, it was not their first time. Or if they did, it's because maybe they had the same backing. Like, I had heard this story just earlier this week about someone who had graduated from school. He had been working part-time, and he had found out, because he was a first-generation American, that he was about to be deported. He only had 60 days left. But he found this actual loophole, which allowed him, it's like, if I could be able to create a tech company and be able to raise at least $250K within that time, that I can actually be able to stay here. And he was actually able to do so. But the reason he was able to do so is because he was able to have an opportunity to be able to work at a tech company while he was working at school. There were people who were able to invest in him. And to me, like, that's a great story of success. But we also know that wouldn't have happened if he didn't have people who are backing him to begin with, right? And that's not always going to be everyone. But just because you can't get it that first time doesn't mean there isn't a way that you can be able to connect. Like, again, everything we're talking about when it comes to collaboration. There is no reason why, if you aren't reaching out to Aaron, if there isn't something that's particularly here, there may be something within the TechNYC community that can be able to work. We're trying to do all this stuff to make sure that we're creating, apprenticeships so that people can learn the skills so that they can be able to have a tech job that's aside from just the entrepreneurship side, so they have something to kind of be able to buttress. There is always an answer. There's always a way that you can be successful. A lot of it is about grit, and a lot of it is about not letting yourself tell you the reasons why you can't do it, because you can.
Awesome. Thank you very much.